Hello 7th grade art. So today's video we are going to look at the actual cup portion of the Berthe Morisot Peony painting and then any other sort of details that we might still need to add. Remember at this point my leaves had 2 layers on them. My flowers only have 1 layer on them. So I definitely would still be working a little bit more into the flowers and then maybe a little bit more into the bottom area of the painting. Now remember, one of the most important things, no matter what painting you are doing your reproduction of, is that you have it on the screen in front of you so that you can actually be looking at what you are reproducing. So once again, I'm going to zoom in here because, like I said, we are focusing primarily on sort of the glass or the goblet, whatever you would like to call that, in this painting. Now, because that glass or goblet is clear, one of the most important things to do is just to focus on painting the colors that you see, which in this particular case is primarily a lighter version of the green of the leaves and a lighter version of the brown background. So again, I'm going to go ahead and start by getting my brown a little bit wet here. I know you guys can't really see my palette, so you just see my arm floating around. I'm going to mix a little bit of blue into that brown because it is a slightly cooler version as well. And then anywhere where I have white within that little goblet area, I have like this highlight, and this highlight, I'm just not going to put anything. So right now it's going to be a little bit darker than what I want it because remember I still need to add a little more water and then that will start to thin it out. But I do want a slightly darker edge along the sort of outline of the cup because there is a bit of a shadow on both sides there. Now on this shadow that I am currently painting, there's also a bit more blue. So I'm going to go ahead and put some more blue in there. And then I'm going to mostly use water from this point just to kind of lighten what I've got. Kind of paint around the green a little bit. There will be places like right now where I go in front of the green. Or down here, for instance. Because remember that goblet or vase, whatever you might want to call it, is see-through. So you are focusing primarily on just matching the colors to what you see. There's a little green up here. Still leaving any of those areas where there is a highlight, like a white space, just not putting any paint in that area right now. And once again, just focusing on the colors that I see, where those colors go, kind of what they look like in there. So here I'm going to actually just scrub some water on this bit of green and then use a paper towel to lighten it. So now I'm just going to continue moving on down. There's a bit of a darker space in here, mostly because it's in front of that table, which is slightly darker in general. There's a little more blue on this part. This whole area here is pretty green. So what I'm doing now is just using some water to soften some of those separation lines and to reactivate the green that is already on the page so that it mixes more with the paint that I'm putting down currently. Because remember, one of the nice things about watercolor is that it will easily reactivate as soon as you add a little more water. Because it is still a water-soluble paint. There's actually a little bit of a gray up here in this bit. So I'm going to use a little bit of black, but mostly water. I'm going to turn my page a little bit so that I can use the tip of my brush here. Still avoiding any of those highlight areas. And then there's quite a bit of a darker green mixed with some brown in this section here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that in there, because this is a combination of the stems and the leaves plus the shadow on the interior of that vase. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just bring some of that dark greenish brown up into my stems a little more. Right now it's quite a bit brown and I don't need it quite that brown. So all I have to do at this point is go ahead and just add some more highly saturated and pigmented green to that. Can add some water in there as well and lift up some of that brown. But you see that the more water I add, the more that green becomes reactivated in the brown and the green mix. So I may not necessarily even need to do that. So that's nice. And then I'm going to just kind of fade it into the background up here. Because looking at her painting, it does kind of just fade into that brown background. It's a pretty soft transition there. So I want to make sure that mine is also. And then there's a little bit more brown on this side. Kind of along the edge there, fading into the background as I move out. There's some more of my grayish blue color down here. Mix a little white in that this time. Because right now I'm doing sort of that reflected area on the table that is under the vase. And it's mostly gray. There's little bits of black and brown and smidges of white in there. But once again, it is mostly gray. So now I'm going to turn my page again so that I can make this edge nice and smooth. And then I'm going to kind of brush that into the rest of the table more. Sort of reactivate the brown that is there. Recreate sort of those brush strokes. Soften this edge a little bit by just blurring it a little between the colors. Because it is much softer on this side than on this side. This side has a pretty harsh line, but then this side has a bit of a softer line. So I'm going to blend a little bit of that brown in there so that that edge does appear softer because the colors mix. Turn my page again. Work on this background, kind of blending that in a little bit. Not as much as I did on this side though. There's a very dark spot sort of right here in the middle, so I'm going to get a good bit of black because it does look like it's black. I'm going to also put a little bit of dark green in there. A little more black. There's a darker spot here. So once again, the biggest thing about painting anything that is see-through or sort of see-through is making sure that you pay attention to the colors that are behind it. Because the colors that are behind it are the ones that you will be using the most, since you will be able to sort of see through. So now I'm just going to put a little bit of this brown in here, but also into my vase, so that I have a little bit more of a match there. And I'm going to grab a bigger brush and just take some of that brown out into the background. Remember to pay attention to the size brush that you use, because you want to make sure that the brush size that you choose makes sense with what it is that you are painting. So here I'm just kind of bringing some of this brown into my background, using more water to sort of lighten it up, bringing it into this sort of black area because they do definitely merge a little bit here. Again, looking at my actual painting that I'm working from more than the painting that I am working on. Because especially once you get to these steps where you are doing finishing touches, it's very important that you observe carefully and try to make it look as accurate as you can. So now I'm just going to continue using my bigger brush as I bring a little bit more brown into that table area down here. Still being careful to not lose my reflected light there. Just bringing some of that texture back into the table, bringing some of the brown back in there. Blending everything together a little bit where it needs to be softer. So then I'll zoom back out a little bit, because then that might be most of the work that I would be doing on the vase. It may not be completely finished yet, but at this point it has a pretty good sort of layer and a half on it. And then the rest of the project, the rest of the reproduction, you would just want to continue observing very carefully to make sure that you are looking for the exact colors that are in the painting and putting them on your page exactly or as close to exactly as you see them.